Today's meeting of ESPO Management Committee. I've received apology from Councillor Haig and Councillors Watson. Could I now invite those present in the room, please, to introduce themselves? Could I now check who has joined in remotely? We should have Goodliff, Ferguson, Feltham, Birmingham and Clancy. So I'll just go around the room now for you to introduce yourself, and we'll start with Maurice.
Maurice Campbell, Assistant Director, Procurement Commercial, ESPO.
David Godsall, Assistant Director, Operations and IT.
Morning all, Christian Smith, Director of ESPO.
Morning, Matt Simon-Smith, Assistant Director, Business Development.
Morning, Dave Goodacre, Commercial Financial Controller at ESPO.
Yes, morning, Kevin Feltham, Leicestershire County Council Representative.
Good morning, Richard Shepherd, Leicestershire County Council Representative.
Morning, Declan Keegan on behalf of the Consortium Treasurer.
Kat Tui, Democratic Services Officer.
Now I'll ask those who are online to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Councillor Goodliff. He's not online. Councillor Ferguson, is he online?
Yes, I'm Stephen Ferguson. I'm County Councillor for St Neots East and Gransden.
Councillor Feltham.
Oh, he's in the room.
He's in the room. Councillor Birmingham. No.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everyone.
Great to hear from you.
I'm a County Councillor for Norfolk County Council.
And finally, Councillor Clancy.
Good morning, Stuart Clancy, County Councillor, Norfolk County Council. And is there anybody I haven't mentioned yet? No? That's great. Yeah. I'll proceed on. There's minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June 2021. Can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting? Thank you. We'll sign them later. And to advise any items that the chairman has decided to take as an urgent elsewhere on the agenda, there are no urgent items. Item 3, which is declarations of interest in respect of items on this agenda. Are there any declarations? Right. We'll move on then. Item 4, items referred to, because we're not we're waiting for some people to attend. We're going to skip the finance report for now and go straight to item 8, which is the Director's Progress Update. That's Christian.
Thank you, Chair. My proposal to run through this paper is to take in sections to hopefully make it a little bit easier to follow for members. So we've got 4 main sections: financial performance, operational performance, staffing, and our risk management process. If I start then with pages 185 to 191, which really covers our financial performance in some depth. The first thing to note really is we've had a fantastic summer trading, so I'm delighted to sit here with a good set of numbers, which is always a pleasing place to be. Despite the real challenges in our economy that we can see at ESPO, we've had a really good bounce back trading summer. The figures go to the end of July, and you can see there's a surplus of £3.4 million that's been created, which is £0.7 million better than budget. Our total sales stood at 28.3 million, which is 1.9 million pounds ahead of budget. You can see our stores at £1 million is about 5% up, and our directs is about 0.3 million pound up. In terms of our procurement business, our rebate income stood at 3.5 million, which is 0.6 million pound ahead. So you can see across the board, we've enjoyed a very good trading period. Our margin is broadly in line with budget, slightly down as a percentage, but ahead as a pound number as you'd expect as a result of trade. Expenditure is at 7.4 million, which is 0.1 million pounds worse than budget. But when you allow for the additional transport and additional volume, and you strip out the underlying staff cost to budget, then I think that's a good financial performance. And the metrics we use here, you've seen in the pack, is expenditure as a percentage of sales, and that stood at 25.8%. In terms of our trading business, ETL and EduZone, at the end of June, Edgezone was at break even, which is slightly ahead of budget, with total sales at 227k, which is 17.1k ahead of budget and 57k ahead of last year. So overall, in terms of our full year trading position, just to remind members, we've set a budget of £5.1 million profit for the year. And although we are trading well and ahead at the moment, as I briefed in the pre-meetings, we think it's prudent to wait till November to come back and do a reforecast for additional profit. And that's simply because we have got problems in our real economy. I think they're fairly visible to people. And there's things that are unsettled, local government pay award costs, insurance costs, there's supply chain challenges, etc. So I think it'd be a bit foolhardy to jump into additional profit at this stage. But as I say, in the next committee, we may be in a position to recommend that we could make an enhanced profit on where we set out at the start of the year. So that gives you quite a lot of information about financial progress. In terms of our operational progress, as I've said already, there are some real challenges out there as a result of external economic and political events impacting our performance. And that comes through very much in the volume statistics that we cover. So whilst our volume's been there over summer, the efficiency and effectiveness has definitely been under stress. And some of the things that I'll draw to your attention is some of the deterioration in agency workforce, both in terms of their availability and their productivity. We know there's a national driver shortage, which affects us in terms of inbound logistics and outbound delivery. We know there's challenges in the container market as a result of COVID, and we can see supply chain stresses from labour markets for all of the above reasons. So when you look at that and the impact on ESPO, you can see our FIFO rating is slightly lower than it would be at 92%. Our availability is at 91.4%, which is again lower than we'd want it to be. Would probably be about 96% this time of year. And we are receiving higher transportation costs. So there are some real challenges for us operationally that we're working through and looking at various options to solve each of these various challenges. But it is a bit of a perfect storm. And I think you can see that in the businesses you're probably interacting with at the moment. In terms of health and safety, no incidents to report for the period. And in terms of facilities management, that's largely been focused on developments at Grove Park, and they are subject to a separate report later on the agenda. There's some information on our IT team's activity, some really good help desk statistics that show that the internal service provided to staff has been very strong over the period. Some of the key work is a refresh of our Infor ERP system, and we are awaiting and working with Leicestershire County Council in terms of recommendations from a recent cyber security audit. Going on to page 194, which gives some insight to the key headlines for staffing. Sickness absence has continued to be well managed, and that's despite COVID rates clearly going up in the region and nationally. Since June, we've had 5 positive cases of COVID, which I think I mentioned is probably quite a small number compared to your own organisations, but I think it's important that we transparently report what's going on at ESPO. One of the big issues for us to consider is the legislation coming in for care home visits from 11th of November, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is essentially requiring vaccination to go in and visit care homes. So rather than trying to get into auditing who's been vaccinated, we're simply looking at our delivery options and actually, do we need to walk in through the front door to deliver a package, or can we deliver it somewhere else? So there's active work going there in terms of making sure we can do our service in a safe way. Random drug and alcohol testing is now live at ESPO, being provided by a private company, and that's also part of an approach that's being adopted by Leicestershire County Council, and as the employer we've taken the same approach. And then finally, again, I'm sure you're well cited on this, but we await the local government pay award update, and as I said, that would have an impact on our cost base. So we obviously eagerly await that, both for our colleagues, but also in terms of our P&L. The last section of the report is to do with our quarterly review of major risk records. And as you can see in the appendices, you have a list of the major risks that we've discussed on our quarterly meeting, an updated record of what we perceive to be our greatest risks. So finally, members are asked to note and support the content of this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. I'll open this to the floor, and The one with a hand up. I can't read your name from here. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. Christian, you mentioned the poor productivity and attendance between agency staff. Is there some compensation or rebate from the agency to make up for that?
Sadly not. I mean, we pay for what we receive. So if we go to an agency and require 10 people, but they haven't got them, then obviously they don't provide them and we don't pay for them. In terms of productivity, that's really difficult because it's not contractual productivity. It's just an expectation of workload. And what you see is we're just not getting through the same amount of work as we have in previous years. And that's not something we can kind of rebate back financially. Obviously, we can change workers and have done, but it has had an impact over the whole summer.
Councillor Clancy.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Overall, I think good report, and I think yourself, the team, and the board to be congratulated. I think positive report under the conditions. I'd just like to highlight one issue because, again, I think you and I have discussed this in the past. Importing from the Far East, the impact of price pressure on containers, and how do you see this with the cost pressures will affect inflationary impact on the business? And better, worse still, obviously the supply chain, I would suggest a lot of your product comes from the Far East. Have you experienced big supply chain difficulties? And secondly, how's the business planning for this? And I do certainly appreciate, because I do this as a day job, that it's certainly not easy, because I think there's container price bumping going on. And how are you setting prices as a business and managing the ongoing inflationary effect of Far Eastern import prices? Thank you.
Thanks for that question. So there's quite a lot to it, but I'll try and keep it relatively succinct. So yeah, first off is just to acknowledge, experiencing the same container price craziness, very unstable market where previously it was seen as quite a stable market. Yeah. So there's reports of sort of 500% increases in containers, and you know that's happening to everybody, and we're no different to that. In terms of the impact on us, we have a couple of things that do go in our favour. One is that we're quite a cash-rich organisation, so we have the opportunity to stock up and store. We're not running some sort of just-in-time manufacture or production plant, so we're able to use cash up to our available capacity in our warehouse to kind of buy ahead. We've also converted our terms and conditions, so it's very clear that the price is our website price and not our catalogue price, because pricing's more dynamic today than it's probably ever been. Yep. Is a challenge for us. We've also got a supply chain group working for ESPO, and what they're looking at is mapping where everything comes from. So we've got good data in terms of understanding our supply chains, and they're working to do some resourcing exercises. And then finally, what we've done is we've been a lot braver this year in terms of making things temporary unavailable. So what we didn't want is someone to order a desk fan because it's hot in summer and deliver it in December, because I think that is ridiculous. So we've kind of more than ever been braver in communicating and being clear what we have and haven't got with our customers. But yeah, I don't think it's going to get better anytime soon. It's probably get worse before it gets better. Yes. So we do need, you know, these various contingency plans.
Just one question, Christian. In terms of the driver shortage, are we managing to manage a way around that and avoiding kind of the obvious disappointment with customers and not getting the product to them at a timely manner?
Yeah, so in terms of the driver, it impacts us both ways in terms of inbound logistics and our own delivery. In terms of inbound, it's just part of that jigsaw about trying to get good availability, and we are impacted by our supply chains, poor driver availability, no question, sort of those inhibitors. In terms of our drivers, thankfully, we're blessed with a really long-serving, loyal group of drivers who have really stepped up over more than you could ever have hoped for over the last sort of 18 months, and you know, we're very reliable in our deliveries. We also, of course, use third-party couriers So and pallet delivery companies who support our delivery. But in terms of the bigger plan, obviously we can't just rely on having great people and goodwill. We are looking with support of the HR Department, Leicestershire Council, in terms of what the remuneration should be for drivers, and that it's keeping pace with the market. So that works in early stages, but certainly being looked at to make sure we keep good availability.
Thanks, Christian.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yeah, Councillor Fitzgerald. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Hello there. Sorry about that. Apologies for being slightly late. My colleague is on the way to actually join you in the room. Just a couple of questions on item 8 then, which one, it appears we're doing well, but forgive me if I missed it, if you did answer. How well are we doing against competition? And also from a risk perspective, Amazon have been doing particularly well and booming during this pandemic. Are they now an even greater risk to us?
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. In terms of competition, I'd say we're largely stagnant. So what you've seen is that people have resorted to going back to their comfort supply. So you see modest growth in development areas, but you see our member areas resorting to using us ever more, and the same for some of our competitors. The evidence for that is the market share data, which shows us as relatively flat over the period. So as a measure of are we gaining market share, marginally, largely flat over the period. There's a kind of broader measure of how we're doing. I think our availability stacks up tremendously well against others, and that's something that we absolutely prioritise as an enabler of efficiency for ESPO. So some of the challenges that I know some of the competitors have faced is overstocking certain items like PPE, and then being stuck with hundreds of thousands of pounds of stock that's got a diminished value. So I'm sure the committee fully gets the idea of dynamic pricing, and there's winners and losers, and it's a bit of a hedge. So we've been very well governed in terms of not buying things speculatively and then hoping that the price doesn't change. So I think I'd probably describe it as slow and steady, but a really good bounce back from our core customers this summer. That was.
Right, thank you. Is there any other questions for Christian? No. Right. As we're not core yet, I don't want to go to the normal agenda, which is kind of where we deal with the financial reports and auditing. So what I would like to do is kind of ask, what was it? The supplementary reports.
We just need to move into private session.
Yeah. So we need to work into. Oh yes, I've got it on here. We need to kind of move into private session for this. Hopefully, Councillor Cole will be here shortly. So I'll ask Kat to basically kind of close us down, so to go into private session. Oh yeah, I therefore move under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded in the following items of business in accordance with the provisions of section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972. And we are now live. So external audit of the 2019-20 financial statements. So it's the Director of Consortium Treasurer. So I'm asked Avtar Sohail, Director of Grant Thornton, ESPO Auditor, to present the external audit of the 2019-20 financial statement.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for giving us time to look at to go through the report. So on a positive, we have concluded the audit, so we've done all the audit work. On a negative, it's taken us a while. So we are behind on this, and it's probably come to you a lot later than we'd normally bring audit findings report to you. The real reason for this was the impact of COVID-19. So when we were about to start the audit, even the planning of the audit, the directive of stay at home was came into effect, and what also happened during the period of time is that there was a number of staff changes on ESPO side, which meant that momentum was continually lost in the audit and how far we got through. So with all these changes, the audit just took longer than anticipated. Also, during this year, we did go through a process of converting from CITFA code of account to the FRS 102 accounts, which meant that there were big changes in the way that the accounts are presented to you, and this actually took more thought and consideration than it would take in normal years. So as a result, this has taken a delay in the audit. But I think what I could do is just say thank you to David and his team, who actually, once David has come in, has actually took a grip and took a control on the ESPO side of how the audit was going, and actually helped us drive and get the audit completed. So the big headline from the audit would be that we are going to have to give a qualified opinion, which is in the form of a limitation of scope. And this was in respect of not being able to undertake sufficient procedures on stock. So to give a bit of context, when the stay-at-home directive hit, we weren't able to attend a stock take, and as a result, we weren't able to apply what was required in the auditing standards. We did look to do alternate procedures at that point, but it wasn't necessary it wouldn't give us the assurance that we were looking for. So it was decided that we would just with management that will give a limitation of scope, because we weren't able to do the procedures that were necessarily under auditing standards. Just to give you some reassurance, this isn't just unique to ESPO. This has happened on a lot of audits this year because of the impact of pandemic and auditors not being able to go and do a stock take. In terms of more difficulties in the audit and more unique features, we've had to, one, as I've already touched upon, is transition to CITFA code to FRS 102. And this took a while in terms of actually accounting and being comfortable with the numbers. So it took a lot of thought and a lot of technical know-how and nuance to actually get to a set of financial statements that we were happy with. There was also the issue of remote working, which basically meant that the audit took longer than anticipated because of we just find it easier that when we're on site to get some of these audit queries resolved and done, and momentum is kept to get the audit done. One of the issues that comes out of our audit findings report is around income recognition, which basically we've put in a point where it says that per the auditing standards, we should accrue based on the financial year. But what happens here is that there's a process where we're just taking it up based on a point in time where where the income is recognised. What we've noted as a point, but fundamentally it won't really have a material impact on the financial statements, because in each calendar year you are accruing for 12 months of income. But we just had to bring that point to attention because there is a cut off, a difference to what the auditing standards would say. There was also one unadjusted item. This resulted from the audit testing we did. We found an error, we've extrapolated, and the error extrapolation value comes to £190,000. However, we've got to say this is an extrapolation, so it's not, a real error. I can't remember exactly how much the numbers involved were to begin with, but we've come to a conclusion that, the value here is not material, doesn't have significant impact on the accounts, and therefore we're satisfied that an adjustment isn't required. So I just wanted to give you that quick summary of what's happened in terms of the audit, but just to conclude that we have completed the work and we will be in a position to sign, but again, it will be a qualified opinion in terms of just that one point on stock. So happy to take any questions.
Right. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Rawlings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our colleagues from Grant Thornton for that report. It's very informative. Just on the stock take issues, I did note that you may well have the same issues for the 2022 year end. I take it that will be possibly, won't be alone in having a scope qualified audit for that. But I just wondered what mitigating measures we can take here to give you some more assurance on the stock valuation. I mean, I don't know. I'm looking at Christian here. I don't know how often we actually compare physical stock, so a sample of physical stock to computer records, etc. Just to give the auditors some more level of confidence. And I did note on the management override of controls, actually the system just allow you to backpost journals, but that's not particularly unusual on an accountancy system. So I just wondered if you could comment on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlins. Yeah, I'm going to be the first to say I'm not going to give you the best answer on this. So I am going to look to the accountants in the room to maybe help me out. But I will say we do an ongoing count, so it's not all left to the end of the year and kind of keep your fingers crossed. But in terms of some of that technical stuff about journals and management controls, if I could pass today.
Sure thing. So a couple of points in there. So in terms of stock, to give you additional assurance, so this is going back to the stock take from March 2020. We do frequent counts throughout the year, but actually from March 2021, we undertook a full count of the warehouse as normal, and this was attended by the auditors. And so far, we've been shared that that no issues were found so far. Although when they come back on site in November, there'll be some follow-up work, but early indication there's no issues found. So that should give the committee some comfort over our stock. The way in which this sort of qualified opinion sort of follows through is really just sort of a legacy from that stock take. So because the auditors aren't able to confirm what is the opening balance for the following year, then that's what caused the problem. And then when you move into the subsequent year, because the accounts show the results for the year and the previous year, it's that previous year's still got the same issue. However, it is all contained to that single issue, and those subsequent stock takes should give comfort over there being no sort of ongoing issues or underlying problems. In terms of controls, you're right, management override of controls is raised in there. What we've seen is that there are certain access rights that are prevalent. So, for instance, my role has the ability to post journals. It just doesn't, and we will be able to demonstrate that. And there are various changes to roles that we're making to try and act on some of these recommendations.
Can I just add in to David's point? Yeah, so we have undertaken the stock take for the year ending March 21, and we're satisfied that there was we've got no issues. So when we do report next year, it is just on the opening balance position as at the year end of last year. So do agree with that. And in terms of the journal system, we have done the detailed testing of journals, and although we found some control weaknesses, when we've actually tested the journal, we haven't actually found errors in the posting of journals or any activity that we want to bring to your attention. Everything that has been posted is legitimate from the testing that we've done on the samples.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting report. I think it's very unfortunate to have a qualified audit opinion because of circumstance rather than because of a genuine failure. And I hear, thankfully, that there has been a stock check and there's not a problem. So it seems a bit unacceptable to be suffering this particular qualification over a 2-year period, because that's how it's going to impact upon the organisation. And I appreciate the comment is for other distribution type industries, but I'm just wondering, from your knowledge of the sector, are our competitors in the same sort of situation? And if they're not, why they're not?
Who's going to comment on this one?
If I start, just because I probably have the most interaction with other parts of our business, in all honesty, this is not an area that we really talk to our competitors about. So I don't, you can imagine I don't talk audit and dirty wash you with them as you expect me not to. So I could do some digging around, but it's something that, you know, me and my peers probably don't try and get into in terms of affecting other people.
I think this might be a point for Avatar to sort of share some of your experience across the sector and other industries, actually. I know we've discussed a number of NHS bodies that have large stock holdings having the same sort of issues with that March year end and not being able to safely come on site. But Avatar, I think this would be a great opportunity to share your sort of broader knowledge of compliance.
Yes, so in terms of, if I give you in terms of Grant Thornton's client base, so any audit which did have a year end of 31st of March 2020, you would see a limitation of scope in if there was a material stock balance. So that was across all sectors. So sectors that I deal with primarily are NHS and local government. And for a number of NHS clients, this was also the case. So we've had to issue limitation of scope opinions on the stock balances. So as I can say, is this is not a unique situation to ESPO. It's just the circumstances around the environment where we just, as auditors, were not allowed to go and do the stock takes.
Thank you. I think Declan wanted to have a word. So, Declan?
Yep, thank you, Chair. It's just a reminder, really. It's not, we don't do the audit because we have to do the audit. The audit's done for the benefit, I suppose, of the different partner organisations to get assurance on ESPO. So it shouldn't be something that, I suppose, creates a competitive kind of detriment compared to other organisations. The key thing is, as members, you understand and you're comfortable that the assurance you're getting of the quality of the account. So hopefully you do get that across. It is an isolated issue, and it's an issue that just moves profit between one year and another instead of fundamentally kind of creating or destroying profit. So I just wanted to put that reminder in.
Thank you, Dick.
If I may come back, Chair. A couple more, if I may.
Yeah.
Thank you for the explanation. I just think, and we've heard you've been asked, can we do other things to improve things so that the auditors can be more comfortable and get rid of the qualification? But we've got another year of this, and it's all very well saying it's not going to have an effect. Actually, anyone doing their due diligence will then look at what the audit report says and will say, oh, there's a qualification there, and maybe the competitors don't have it. So my concern is we need to get out of the situation, which is a creation of COVID and not a creation of any lack in terms of the business. I'm just wondering what your view would be about that.
Comment?
It's certainly something that Avatar and myself have discussed. Obviously, starting quite late into this process, most of the process around verifying the stock would need to be done on or around the year end, and the longer that you leave it to try and to do those steps, the harder it gets to do that. Certainly where we are now, I think it's very, very difficult. I don't think there's much of anything we could do to actually give the auditors that comfort. And Avatar, please step in at any point. Certainly at the time, obviously, we're well aware of what was going on and the challenges of COVID and trying to restrict access to the site to be safe for our staff and the auditors. And that just makes it very, very difficult, certainly at the time and even now or retrospectively, to try and put steps in place to give the auditors that comfort over the stock value that was in the warehouse on March 2020.
And just to add to David's point, I think it's just, if you fundamentally look at it, we are just talking about one specific balance. And if we were to try and go back and do alternate procedures now, I don't think it would be physically possible to do that, and it would probably be quite time consuming and costly to even attempt to do this stock take. So, I think at this point we just have to be, in our opinion, we do just make consideration to one specific balance, and we do actually say it is a result of COVID and it's just isolated. So that's as far as we can really go with this issue.
Councillor Cole.
So sorry to keep on going, Chair, but There's only one other issue which I spotted, which is on page 17, the title Audit Findings for ESPO for the year ended 31st of July 2020 and not March. And you said you've done a snapshot of a particular time. Is that why that error's crept in?
Yeah, I think this is just a typo, sorry, and we can update that.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Cole, for noting the typo. I think the only solution to this one in terms of kind of avoiding qualified accounts is basically kind of hopefully that we'll get back to the normal and people feel confident enough to go and do a stock taking in the normal manner. And while we can't, I think the problem's got to be a qualified one and noted as a qualified situation caused by the COVID situation. So I'm hopeful by next March, when they do the stock take, that people will feel confident enough to attend. So, Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, this issue obviously will raise an eyebrow, and I discussed it at the member meeting we had last week. And it seems to me an important point to emphasise is that it was the auditor's choice, in the interests of their own safety, not to come on site, not because they were barred from coming on site. That may be a layman's reasoning or excuse for the situation, but in terms of pragmatic, facts, it seems to be worth saying that and making that very public, because clearly, when you say the word, and it can't be unqualified, it does of course raise an eyebrow, right? Well, more than an eyebrow.
I'll just jump in on that.
Go on, Az.
Yes, I was going to say, at that point in time, on the 31st of March 2020, government advice was to work from home, and therefore we weren't allowed to come out, and we were following government advice at that point. So I think that's where we were at that point in time.
Thank you. I think we kind of, rather than kind of go over and over this, one, the stock take did occur. It's just that it wasn't overseen, and any company would want to kind of get an accurate stock take at the end of any financial year anyway. So otherwise your accounts are meaningless. It's just that it wasn't overseen and verified by the auditors. So Christian has got another comment.
Yeah, sorry, not wishing to elongate. I guess I'm trying to be helpful in thinking, well, whilst the kind of substantial facts are not going to change, I think there is a point about presentation. So I wonder if we could just simply ask for that presentation to be taken away and looked at so that we can agree a form of wording that gives the best presentation of something that we can't avoid.
Yes.
I think that would be very fortuitous and actually kind of details the situation a lot better for everybody, including the members.
Definitely.
So on that point, I would like to move on, if possible, and ask you to. We are asked to approve the 2019-20 financial statements. No, we are asked to approve the external audit of the financial statement 2019-20. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
You all agreed? We got hands up on the screen as well. Yes.
Subject to the notes, what we now agreed, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Subject to and a little bit of qualification on the headline.
Yeah.
All right. And I'll take that as agreed as far as I can see. Thank you. So we'll next move on to item 6, which is the financial statement and annual governance statement. Can I invite David Goodacre to introduce this report?
Absolutely, Chair. So this follows on very nicely from the last agenda item and actually covers the actual document that's produced off the back of the audits and financial statements and an accompanying governance report, which we also issue on an annual basis. So as we kind of said before, we've changed the rules that we're applying for this, and ESPO isn't actually required to follow local government rules. So last in November 2019, the committee approved the decision to change to rules more commonly used with commercial businesses, because we thought that while still giving an element of transparency, the requirements are less onerous. So this is the first time the accounts are presented on that basis, and I guess subject to some minor changes, which will come in the director's report at the front to better articulate the audit point. the report largely stands to be approved. So the key sort of areas to be aware of, the overall profit in the accounts is £4 million. And you'll recognise that, or perhaps recall some of you, that a dividend of £4 million was paid out in respect of that year. The balance sheet is showing a strong position with a healthy cash balance. We maintain that to allow us to invest in our working capital, but also to give us a level of reserves for future repairs, renewals, and ultimately potential investment in the business. In terms of the annual governance statement, the other document that was accompanying, this is actually something that's been to the committee before. So back in September 2020, a draft came and was largely approved, but there was the proviso that it needed to be returned to the committee when the final accounts were presented. And this all sits together nicely to try and give the committee assurance over our governance arrangements. And the annual governance statements brings together nicely the results of internal audit, our external audit, and the management team's assessment of the governance arrangements. And the key takeaway from that is there aren't any material weaknesses identified in there. And so this should help give the committee comfort over ESPO's governance arrangements in general in that year, but also give comfort in improving the financial statements to be signed as well, and subject to the slight change we discussed earlier. So I think on that note, I think we'll just take any questions you might have.
Take questions. Councillor Cole.
I do apologise for monopolising the questions, Chair. I was just wondering, it's beyond what we see in front of us, is when we might see the 2020-21 accounts and plans, because normally we would have expected to see them by now. I'm just wondering, I guess it's COVID as it has been for so many times, but when are we likely to see them, please? So
the audit is booked in for November, and what we've seen is that first of all, around sort of early part of after the year end, Grant Thornton tends to work with NHS, and you move to local government over the summer, and then they're moving on. We're moving on to ESPO sort of later on. So it should be very in the early new year, Councillor.
Any other question, Councillor Rawlins?
In terms of, if you were a limited company, you would have to file these within 9 months of the year end. I think it's going some to not have it looked at before then. That would be my comment, particularly in view of local government accounts, where we have to get them sort of more or less done and dusted by the end of July, albeit we've had delays in the actual auditing. And I know you are in a unique situation because you're not in that position, but I would just appreciate your comment on that. As if you were a limited company, there'd be no choice unless you wanted to have a hefty fine, or the reputation of not putting the things in on time. And also, just on a general point, we said about bank interest payable there now, and basically it'll be, I take it the interest will. And again, going back to some points we made earlier, you get inflationary pressures when we look at budgets and things like that. Perhaps we can look forward to those figures actually rising in the future if interest rates go up, which I'm
sure. So good question.
Pretty sure they will.
In terms of the accounts and sort of my opinion on the timings, it's a really valid point. We see the timetable for is slightly behind perhaps where it was historically. And that's certainly something that we could or should look at doing. It's dependent on capacity from the auditors to be able to come on site. With, as you said, local government needs real hard-pressed deadlines, which are committed. ESPO's in the fortunate position that it isn't subject to those legal requirements of the legislation governing submission on a certain deadline. And I suppose that would be why we're behind some of the local government. But it's certainly something we could look at for the future. The changes in staff that we've had have sort of slowed things down a little bit as well, and the combination of the two might give us some opportunity for future years. In terms of bank interest payable, yes, that's a good spot as well. This all relates to the original purchase of ESPO's warehouse at Barnsdale Way, where we've got a bank loan that we're paying off. That's all organised through LCC's Treasury facility, who support us with that. And we've managed that and put that through the medium-term financial plan as well.
Any other questions? Could you switch your mics off, please? Any other questions? Councillor Coles again.
Thank you, Chair. The last question I have on this one is on page 126, the AGS self-assessments. A lot of want to do things. I'm just wondering how far you progressed with those. Thank you.
We're working through the AGS statement for 2021 at very currently now. So we're working through those steps currently.
Great, thank you. And I don't see any other questions. And on that point, I would ask, we are asked to approve the 2019-20 financial statement and 2019-20 annual governance statement. Have I got your approval, please? Show of hands here. And are we all clear on the screen? And I think we are. So on that, I'll take that as approval unanimous and declare that as approved. We can now move on to proposed changes to the contract procedure rules. And I can invite Maurice Campbell to introduce this report, which was lengthy, I might add.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll try and keep this as brief. The purpose of this report really is just to detail proposed changes to the contract procedure rules for the procurement as is required. As I mentioned in the report, Rule 8, which is part of the contract procurement rules, stipulates that on an annual basis, the Director of ESPO, in consultation with the Director of Law and Governance at LCC, should at least once a year report to Management Committee in relation to the operation of these rules and any particular changes. The officers of Leicestershire County Council and ESPO have been working together to review the contract procedure rules. At the June Management Committee, we provided a report on whether or not there were any exceptions to the rules from covering the period July 2018 to 31st of May 2021. We confirmed that there wasn't. We also detailed some exemptions. This is where we had to extend various contracts and frameworks because of the COVID pandemic, and that was detailed to the committee and approved. At the same time, we said that we would come back to the committee to incorporate and present changes for the CPRs for two reasons. One, because LCC were changing their CPR rules, and obviously the ESPO CPRs will need to align with our servicing authority, and also to incorporate any changes as a result of changes in the public procurement regulations as a result of a new procurement bill. On that latter point, on the new procurement bill, that has not been confirmed as yet. The scope is still yet to be defined, and the government has not announced a confirmed timetable for the implementation of that bill. So that is still awaited. On that second point, LCC have actually amended their CPRs just to bring them up to date in terms of thresholds and to tighten some of the language. And because LCC have done that, we as ESPO have had to update our CPRs. So like I said, the proposed sort of changes at the high level, LCC level, were agreed by the full council of Leicestershire County Council on 7th of July. We have now revised our CPRs, and it's been approved by myself, Head of Procurement, and our commercial solicitor, working in conjunction with LCC. The changes are detailed in Annex A, and the new proposals that will be effective from October are detailed in Annex B. Assuming that the Management Committee approve the draft, we will obviously publish that on the intranet. Just before I move to recommendation, just to go back to the new procurement bill, just as of today, I was trying to find out just exactly where the Cabinet Office and Government are. They've come back to me today and said, definition is still yet to be determined, like I said before. The earliest possible implementation in terms of introducing the bill likely to be kind of spring next year, with implementation not likely to occur until 2023. And there was a big caveat around that, and that was subject to any parliamentary timetabling and priorities that the government may set. So in terms of recommendation, Management Committee are asked to approve the proposed amendments to the contract procedure detailed in Annex B, and therefore the proposed contract procedure rules in Annex B. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. Any questions on procurement? I didn't realise it was such a complicated issue until I read this report, but are any comments? Councillor Rawlins.
Do we still have to give recognition to the EU situation regarding procurement rules? But I mean, we make lips. I mean, we do refer to them. I don't know how relevant they are now.
Yeah, I think there's still a reference in there. I mean, the amendment was very sort of light touch, and it's waiting for a major review, which will incorporate the changes brought about by the new procurement rule. And in that process, all references to EU will be removed.
Any other questions on procurement? Obviously, a comment coming from Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to add in, but you know, that is kind of a little bit about just updating documentation. So just because I know it's a live question I get a lot in terms of, do we advertise in Europe? No. Does the European courts sit over our public procurement anymore? No. So it's more about updating language rather than any real control.
I must admit I was surprised to see some references to the EU in there, but I believe a lot of the rules from the EU were rolled into legislation anyway, so we still have to adhere to them. So any other comments on that? I will then confirm we are asked to approve the proposed changes to the contract procedure rules as detailed in Appendix A and set out in Appendix B. Have I got your approval? And looking for raised hands, and we got raised hands on the screen?
No dissent. So.
No dissent. All right. On that, I'd like to say that's been approved. And here we have just 4 minutes to. I think we've kind of come to the end of the meeting. I'd ask members to note the dates coming forward for future meetings as laid out on the agenda. And before I close, is there any other questions before I close up? No. I would thank everybody for attending. I would thank Kat here for guiding me through this process, because we've ended up having to do the kind of a